There is no epic loot here, only puns, by Ch.213. Chapter 213, NPC versus MVP. The room was not cold enough. This is interesting, Surma mused as she stood in the room dedicated to those who had fallen. Surma looked up at the main statue of the woman. It was a talented piece of work, more focused on humanizing the figure rather than making her divine. Her sadness more the emphasis than any higher power. A funny thing for a dungeon to do. She could maybe guess it was a bluff or some way to lower one's guard, but Surma didn't think so. Even if dungeons could create almost anything, a sense of empathy wasn't one of them. She was also a little confused about the lack of actual victims. Even baby dungeons had at least double digits in terms of foes they had defeated. Most were a violent upheaval in places they landed, and grew into fringes of the world teeming with unimaginable monsters or isolated spots, suffering under clashing cultures and stagnant lives. Dungeons were catalysts, but to what end Surma could never guess. She looked around the room, hugging herself and a little thankful for the ridiculous suit, as it seemed to have some power to contain heat, even when it was so thin. Thankfully, Surma could wear comfortable clothes underneath it, or she'd never have worn it. It was just that priestess of truth. Damn her. Surma was mostly sure that shrewd scientist Yatina knew exactly what she was doing when she let Kemi do all the requesting and pleading and smiling and her eyes lighting up when Surma said yes, and Surma needed to learn to say no if she was going to be any sort of decent queen. Her capability to disagree or reject earnest people was becoming dangerously weak. If Mas and his new friend Dio asked her to go to war, Surma would be on a horse, waving a scepter and crying for the heads of leaders before she knew what was going on, and that was not a good thing, right? Mule, you know what I mean, right? A king or queen must be tough, unyielding, and solid, she told the slime who was a puddle in her hands, gurgling gently in delight. Surma, you need to do an offering, then we can go, came the bored tone of Grim. Surma needed Grim. He was the sole calm voice of this group, aside from herself. He could wrangle Dio and Kemi, which unburdened the load on her side immensely, when it came to handling Mas and making Yatina focus. Surma would also sooner drown herself than ever tell Grim this, as the boy took any sign of weakness as a chance to smugly stand above you. Except Dio, Grim was very nagging when it came to him. Leaving the room, Surma paused at the door and looked back, her heart heavy with worry. The others swore that this dungeon was good, and even friendly, but Surma worried all the same that her name, or far worse, her friends' names, would appear on these walls before the day was out. It wasn't anything the dungeon had done, but Surma just couldn't shake the lessons she had learned growing up. Her father had told her and her sisters to behave, or they'd be sent to the dungeon for the night. The same thing he did with criminals. The criminals never escaped. Surma still had nightmares about that sometimes. Surma walked up to the offering table and without ceremony dumped a gold ring into the bowl decorated with small but pure gems of all sorts. A gift she had received upon becoming 12. It had been too large to wear until recently, but Surma was glad to be rid of it. It clattered into the bowl with a ringing noise while Surma walked on. In Surma's ideal kingdom, royalty was not proclaimed by gold and gems worn on fragile fingers, but in actions and responsibilities that took on strong shoulders. It was a ring of her grandmother's, but Surma hadn't heard anything nice about her either, to be fair. Let's go, she instructed, and walked confidently down the hall, looking for obvious holes for traps or spikes protruding from the ceiling. She was royally prepared for this. A sign jumped out from the nearby wall on some extended pole, and Surma screamed, stabbing it with a knife she had in her sleeve. Behind her, Grim, who had been far too quiet, burst out in delighted demonic cackles. Surma turned and threw her now empty knife sheath at him. Delta was standing back, far back, from the group as something strange was going on. Frowning, she teleported down to the bottom floor to call on Nu and Prim, but only Prim showed up. Nu is following up on some signals from Jelligon. The little scary monster is getting all jittery with energy, Prim explained, and Delta could ask about that, but she had a more pressing matter. Anytime Dio and Mass interact, I get weird. My brain goes dungeon-like, she explained, and Prim pulled up what seemed to be streams of pure, nonsensical data to Delta's eyes. It's not a big deal. Their seeds are just podmates. It makes them enticing, Prim said, and turned to leave and game once more. But Delta dragged her back by her green screen corners. Explain, or I'm deleting all your save files, she warned, and Prim shuddered. Seeds all come from the lost little brother, right? Prim said, turning slowly as if to shake off the accursed sensation of human touch. Despite basically bleeding out all over Brother's back and making people, and then falling into the abyss, making echoes, every seed has its place in little Brother's body somewhere. Like cells in a squishy demon, as I used a sawed-off shotgun to remove its head, Prim said casually. The two children simply have seeds, even if one is not technically a replaced dungeon clone that came from the same cluster. Seeds may corrupt and give rise to unpleasant results, but the seeds themselves contain a lot of different things. Dio and this Mass seem to be sharing joy, Prim concluded. Dio and Mass have seeds or children of seeds from the lost brother's good mood? Delta tried to understand. And if said seeds overflowed or become corrupted, making echoes or something else, it would be best for a prototype dungeon to go berserk in trying to claim them before it grew too much. Yes? Echoes would get stronger and more stable by absorbing similar wavelengths. What you're likely feeling is the old dungeon instincts. I'm sure you'll either break it, give it cursed life, make it cry, or destroy it, Prim concluded. Delta was thinking this over when a thought occurred to her. Maharia? She called, and from the darkness, the stillness where death and despair could be hiding in all shades of existence, the small pixie emerged with a smile. Yes, my dungeon, she sang. Echo cults. Do they tend to attract same-minded folks over time, like weirdly similar? She asked the undead lich. You can have a different face, be a different race, and even have special taste. However, in your heart, we all echo, Maharia said, and then looked far too casual. Cults tend to have hive mind over time, yes. Sun was different, he had so many flavors of people following him. It was more than just a single think tank, but something special, something evolving, Maharia mused, then looked away. Okay, that's mildly ominous. Have you been practicing? Delta asked, and Maharia looked pleased when Delta noticed. I finally have more than unwaveringly loyal skeletons to give me feedback, she admitted with a twirl of her small body. Does the echo nearby in town have that effect? Delta wondered, Maharia looking dismissive at the concern. That one is a waste and a failure. It does not nurture the seeds within, but converts them to boring drones. That echo thinks 1 and 1 and 1 is the bee's knees when everyone else is working on exponential growth. It's a little sad, but while he might have lots of seeds he can interact with, he himself is not really a unique flavor. He's a little bit of nothing, from all over, Maharia promised with a snort. So it's harmless? Delta asked slowly. Well, to us, yes, mostly, Maharia promised, and Delta stared at her. Mostly? My, this is unexpected, Mr. Japes told Vass as they stood outside the heavy metal door near the edge of town that led deeply into the underbelly of the area. It had been torn open from the inside. A massive twist of shrapnel of metal slammed into the lock like a delicate key. Something evil escaped, Vass said, and Japes patted his pride on the head. Perhaps, but it is stronger than it should be, or is it more focused? He asked himself and turned to see the path leading into a nearby alley and then Durance proper. Trash can lids, bricks, empty bottles, and more had all been collected as if valuable. Come on, Vass, let us hunt a would-be adventurer, Japes instructed, and casually began to follow the trail, his little boy close behind. Thomas Darkblade walked forward, the bustle of the town invigorating him with a deep desire to look for groups and ask for invites. 2 priests, but only 1 warrior. Cut her and get a mid-range offense, he said to one group, annoyed at their over-reliance on healing when damage was an option. They backed away from him, but something in the warrior's face changed as Thomas Darkblade's wisdom took root. Overwhelming firepower won most fights. Healers were just there to increase odds and help. He walked forward, brushing the sides of a woman. That sword is old and outdated. A new one is there for some silver, he told her with a nod to a stall, and the woman became annoyed. It's my father's, she snapped, and then she seemed to really look at the sword with some pain as his experienced words sank in. It is a little chipped, she admitted, almost forgetting Thomas Darkblade was there. He inhaled people's insecurities, their doubts, their weaknesses, and he breathed logic into them. He brushed up against a group of professions in white. Your weapon diversity is terrible. You need to improve the selection to optimize your pierce, blunt, and slashing, he said, and they looked at him with bored expressions. Thomas Darkblade was about to move on but froze. He turned back. You all have the same weapon, he repeated. It's standard issue, one of them said, and Thomas Darkblade narrowed his eyes. Starting equipment is trash, he stressed. Something was wrong with these ones. It was as if their very souls had gone deaf, had cut their ears off and become dull fools. He cheerfully grabbed one by the neck and lifted him in a friendly manner. You seem new at this. Newbies can be frustrating, but I am Thomas Darkblade. I shall ensure you get on the correct path to race to the end game and get the optimal build that makes you very special and just like everyone else. He promised, and the man was so excited he couldn't speak. He was so happy he was choking. His 2 team members were trying to hit him with poor, sad equipment, too obviously trying to be the first to receive his teachings. But Thomas Darkblade has near 80% reduction on all slash weapons, on top of his physical damage reduction, on top of his rings of protection, on top of his socks of mitigating, on top of his... Fire consumed him, lightly at first, but it burned through his defenses like a hot knife. Thomas Darkblade dropped the man and turned with a smile. A fire mage. I am a huge fan. Massive damage per second potential, he praised the blonde man. You want to spend the night behind bars for attempting to choke the life out of a fair play member? I get the hostility, but behave, the mage warned. Thomas Darkblade was ready for this. Here's 2 gold for your services, and to look the other way. Thomas Darkblade winked. The man took the gold, his eyes going distant for a moment. Such fun. He was a god. Gods enforced the law, but all gods could be bribed. The man wobbled as if trying to make his body behave. I passed the speech check, run along, Thomas Darkblade insisted. Oi! Thomas Darkblade turned, and a fist sunk into his face, collapsing the mimicry of bone and flesh. No one breaks Chris's mind except me and a bottle of cherry fairy whiskey, the woman said. Thomas Darkblade simply stood up as his innate healing fixed the damage in seconds, with the help of some stale bread. Now named, the god called Quiz seemed to shake off Thomas Darkblade's influence like a cobweb. And you are interesting, Thomas Darkblade decided as he eyed the massive woman who looked like she bench-pressed bovines for fun. That wasn't very nice, Quiz said, pocketing Thomas Darkblade's gold without shame as he glared. You make my skin crawl, the woman decided, and Thomas Darkblade felt this was a boss encounter. And doing what any sad solo player should do, he mentally sent out a group invite. An open, no limit, no level restricted, no item level group invite. All around them in the market, people began to go from simply watching the scuffle to turning interested. They would join in soon, but Thomas Darkblade was more interested in the little pieces of himself rushing forth from every bar, special bargain store, and cave in the nearby area. Thomas Darkblade reached out, and the coughing doll one got to share some of Thomas Darkblade's bread. Even dull, even deaf, a little piece of Thomas Darkblade was pure skill. Bruley, get away. Don't let him put anything near you, he's toxic. Quiss, the fire mage guard, cried out. Turning, Thomas Darkblade raised a hand and caught the woman's kick as it tried to land without warning. This woman was an NPC. No, almost an NPC. Too different for him to ever work with, as a person, but maybe as a pack mule? A strong woman to carry all of Thomas Darkblade's things over cold mountains and in deep dungeons. It was almost exciting. We should help, Vass said, as they stood far back in the shadows of an alley. We will help, but this is a symptom, not the cause of the problem, Japes said softly. His boy had gotten attached to the people. Japes could have prevented it, but there was no problem with it in his eyes. Every healthy boy needed friends and such. Japes never had any, and that might have caused him to be the way he was now. Or was it the intense trauma and dark dealings he did in his teens? It was hard to guess. I don't get it, Vass admitted. Japes bent down as Quiss went flying through a cart of green vegetables, making the owner weep at the loss of profits. Vass, echoes are monstrous things, he said gently. How do you know? Vass asked curiously. I was one, for a time, until I got bored, he said kindly and then pointed back to Tommy Dullblade. Echoes focus. They become little drains and settle. Thomas was settled and now he's not. I could blame that dashing woman Yatina. Her mind was sharp as a scalpel and just as fun to dance with, he admitted, then looked back at Vass, who looked more confused. A little worm is wriggling in his ear, but I suspect I know who this pest is, and if it is her, things are on the move. I just need to make sure this is all Thomas Darkblade and not Thomas Darkblade and more to come, he told Vass, who looked doubtful. Thomas can be handled by mortals. Most weak echoes can be. Once they understand his limited worldview, they'll drown him out. But Errol, she's different. She's a threat. Japes warned while standing back up in time to see a robotic-acting man surging forward to ambush Quiss and Ruli. Vass still looked upset, and Japes sighed. He stretched a leg out and tripped one up. See, your papa is helping, he said brightly. Vass's response was less than he hoped for. Spiders? This seems simple enough, Surma decided as she eyed the mass room of webs, with only some narrow passages open to move about in. Surma didn't mind bugs and related small critters. I can cut us a way through, Mass said before screens opened before them, saying challenges had been disabled for a first-time proper run in the dungeon, and to come back another day to do fun challenges in each room for fun rewards. The dungeon was luring them back with special events? How devious. No need. This room is a response of sort. The more violence you dish out, the greater the response. We should move through carefully unless your princess challenge insists you beat every secret boss and such. Grim spoke up. Surma didn't think it was fair to Grim, but for a moment his words sounded like something her father might have said far too casually. Bare minimal effort. As the youngest is all I will expect from you. It is a gift your sisters would envy, he said to her once while her sisters performed musical shows or dined with important foreign guests. Surma was to simply exist. I want the challenge, she insisted. As she spoke the words, the door on the side of the room leading deeper closed as the curtains of webbing began to ripple. Oh fun, I hope you say that in every room, Grim bit out with a grimace. Surma managed a small smile to herself. Grim, us? The room rippled as a massive white ghostly spider descended from nowhere, touching down with elegance that made Surma feel like a sentient potato. The back of the spider glowed along a jagged line before a humanoid form rose up with the head of a spider, making some sort of horrific yet beautiful centaur-like form in a long gown of glimmering web. Actually, this is good. I can make notes to sell at outrageous prices, Grim said. Dia waved at the spider as if it was a dear friend. Surma, this is weird and scary and awesome, Mass whispered as the spider thing turned once to the ceiling, where a dozen smaller spiders carried a curving blade to the spider-woman's hands. Surma saw it coming through a tiny hole in the ceiling. The blade itself felt different, as if it weren't part of this room, this event. Not yet. On the blade's otherwise shiny surface was a dirty stamp of sorts, like a soot mark by the maker. This is really going to do wonders for arachnology and culture customs alike, Yatina decided. The spider queen, for there was no other real word for it, pointed at Surma with her curved blade, as if to invite her forward. A one-on-one? Grim asked with a frown to his face. Behind the queen, the smaller spiders did a series of elegant waves with their legs. Wonder what they're saying? Dia mused. It's the, you invited her to the dance floor, now dance or be gone, dance, Yatina said, looking at them with her odd eyeball. Feeling something in her stomach like growing fire, she pulled out her rapier, and in her mind repeated her cloth-hardening spell. The rest would come down to experience, luck, and whatever else came her way. End of chapter.
I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.